Thank you very much. Vielen Dank für Ihre Unterstützung. Vielen Dank für alle Deutschen und für Deutschland, für Ihre Unterstützung. Diese Unterstützung ist sehr wichtig für die Ukraine. Unsere Sprache, das ist Englischsprache, aber ich kann etwas auf Deutsch erzählen und sagen. Und für mein Volk die Unterstützung von Deutschland sehr wichtig ist. Deutschland ist ein Beispiel für die ganze Europäische Union. Und danke für alle Ihre Unterstützung, für alle Ihre Hilfe. Dankeschön. Concerning your question, we're supposed to be start from another point of view. I was supposed to be the third one, but you asked me to be the first one in the panel discussion because I just came. You're right, from Kiev, because I'm tomorrow go to Spain, to Portugal, because I have some humanitarian issues to resolve, and I have to prepare the humanitarian supply of some food and of some important things. I'm not going to speak about the political issues a lot, but the most important thing which I want to say now that despite 1 year of the second aggression, we call the war which started last year the second aggression of the Russian Federation, because we lived 9 years in the state of war because of the first Russian aggression in 2014. And for all Ukrainians, it was very obvious that the war is inevitable, that the real war will come for the second time, one more time, after the 2014. So on the one hand, the war which started in February last year was surprise. On the other hand, a lot of people anticipated this aggression. So now, after the 1 year of the war, we see that the Europe and the Ukrainian society changed. And I didn't see any fear in Kiev now, and I didn't see the fear of the people, in the eyes of the people last year in February, because I was in February, in March in Kiev. I saw how the Russians tried to take the Kiev, and I saw that a lot of people didn't have any kind of fear. We have some kind of immunity against Russian possible or real war, which supposed to be. And my mother still lives in Kiev, and as a lot of people in Ukraine, they are accustomed to see the drones and the rockets, and they unfortunately, or fortunately, I don't know, but they don't have any kind of fear. And we don't have any kind of panic now, and we didn't have panic on the eve of the war. There was some slight panic during the first days of the war, very slight panic, but it was not a panic, but maybe absence of understanding what would be the next, but not chaos, not panic, not fear. We will speak about it later, but now I just want to hand over my feelings from Kiev and from Ukraine. So we don't have still any kind of panic, any kind of fear, but it doesn't mean that all the world have to stop help us. Because the future of the war, the future of the Europe, depends on Ukraine and on your help to my country. And I was very pleased when I was present during the first panel, and I was listening the talk of two representatives of Bundeswehr when they speak about the necessity of much more information and other things to bring more young people to understand what's happening, what does it mean war, what does it mean army, what does it mean military service. This kind of propaganda is very important because I'm not sure that the war will stop this year. I'm not sure. I'm not sure that the war will stop next year. So we should be prepared for any kind of events or developments. This is the most important thing which I want to say, because inside Ukraine I see what's happening. And I don't see any signs of stopping the war this year, unfortunately. And I think you are all also see what happened in reality. Thank you. As you said about my scientific background, I have already PhD, and I have PhD in social philosophy and history. And I currently make a postdoc. No, it's okay. It's okay. Postdoctorate actually, scientific work in Lithuania, in political department. And as a PhD scientist, I cannot tell you now the alternative for word propaganda. We use positive and negative, as well. Some of the previous speakers already did. Concerning the two important things which my colleagues emphasized, and answering your question also, I think three main points were unique points, unprecedented points were did during the first week of the Russian aggression. First of all, I want to say that we didn't have, and you and nobody had such kind of experience during the last 70 years, when a huge country tried to penetrate another country from different sides. So we didn't have any kind of manual practice what to do. And it was unique experience. And what we Ukrainians did, it was in field, in practice, by mistakes and by positive result. The other important thing which we should take into our account before analyzing, that we had already 8 years of war.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
This is the most important thing, because I'm from east of Ukraine. I'm from Donetsk, from Donbass, from heart of the occupied territories, and I know my region. Maria also from west of Ukraine, from Dnipro. This is a city which is frontline actually, and we know a culture and civilization of post-Soviet countries. So when we heard their propaganda, we have already immunity, because we understood what they theoretically can do. And for us, for Ukrainians in Ukraine, it was everything clear, obvious, what they can do in the media. So that's why when they use for the second time military repression in February last year, I think that their propaganda, Russia propaganda, was absolutely useless, because we had already immunity, but it could be successful for the other countries, could be, for European and for post-Soviet countries also. What we did, our president, the government, and the civil society. First, as Professor mentioned and Maria mentioned, our president was very active. He took microphone, he took video, camera, very simple, and became to do a lot of video in English also. He was not good in English, but he improved his English about the current situation. So he had direct influence on the audience, because he was first speaker. The second speaker was the foreign media, and then German or the other politicians. And we see the result. We saw the result. I made an interview with Streeck-Zimmermann 2 months ago in Munich conference, security conference. And Madame Streeck-Zimmermann told me that in German, you had a very serious, long evaluation of the public opinion about the war. And it was, it was all tendency in all the world. So our president changed a lot of things. The other thing, the second important thing, was coordination of all TV channels. So it was created, in the first hours of the war, it was created so-called United News, or Vereinte Nachrichten. We call it in Ukrainian language nationalny marathon, the national marathon. So these some kind of coordinated 6 main TV channels. They were all private, all private property, except one. And there were a lot of contradictions, political, between these channels because of the other political groups, but they all were united and then explained to the people inside Ukraine what happened. Their main audience was inside Ukraine, not for foreign, because president was responsible for the foreign. And the third, the last thing, which is very, very delicate but very important, during the first weeks and months of the war, we were in defense. We were not in offensive, But even when we were in defense, there were some important victories of Ukrainian army. Small, in the scale, but important, even during the first hours and days. These victories were shown to the world and to the people inside Ukraine. Small, but important, by aircraft, by the resistance in airports. It inspired a lot of people, and it destroyed the myth or illusion that Russian army is unbeaten. Everybody understood, realized that it's ordinary people, the Russian army. So these 3 crucial things were made during the first days of the war. A lot of were done, but we need more time to speak about it. Please repeat your question. Repeat question. What do you mean? What exactly my estimation you need? In what sense?
I thought about that.
That's why I'm journalist, yeah? I'm kidding. Well, because I agree with Maria and also with Professor. They know brilliantly the situation. I think that Russian main fail in their information or some kind of strategy which they had before the war was that they did not seriously estimate or maybe underestimate the civil society of Ukraine. I think this is the biggest mistake of their analytics. And Maria agree, and millions of Ukrainians will agree with me. I know what I'm speaking about. So the civil society, which was very, very dynamic during the first days of the war, and I was a part of this society, despite that I was a very, very famous international journalist, and I went to one of the Western cities to Ukraine and became preparing the bread for the people, for displaced persons. So we all try to find a new social role and of every people. And nobody tell us from politicians or from other what you have to go there, or you have to go there, or you have to take the lager house, the storage for humanitarian thing, or you have to go to fight. Where it was very, very, very self-organized process. And our government made their own important mission. They connected with the foreign, which we cannot do, civil society, because we have connections. We had a lot of supporters out of Ukraine. We have Ukrainian diaspora, but the political level was very, very important. And the governor was responsible for this level. Next month, my scientific article will be published concerning the problem of adaptation and integration of Ukrainians in the European Union. And the Ukrainian diaspora was very important during these first days, because all over the Europe and the world, they tried to promote what happened inside Ukraine. And that what did not happen 8 years ago. Because Russia propaganda 9 years ago was very, very tough, very powerful. They persuaded some people in the world that the aggression did not happen. But we Ukrainians know that aggression happened. But still there are some people in Europe that they don't want to comment what happened in Ukraine. Yeah? This is another part of our discussion and maybe our activity, but this war is not win. We need more time, more help, and we need more time to be much more persuasive in our activity, because the war did not stop.
What changed in the last 9 years? Because you said 9 years ago the Russian propaganda communication was much stronger. What changed?
Three points. First, the aim of the war. The Russian, in 9 years ago, I think the aim was different from the aim which they uprised last year. So they wanted to conquer Kiev, the capital, last year, and to control the country. 9 years ago, there was another aim. It was just to destabilize the country, to make it weaker, but not conquer all the country. You know? The other thing, the civil society. 9 years ago, there was a huge part of so-called pro-Russian Ukraine, so-called pro-Russian Ukrainians, but also it's very artificial word. But after the 9 years, the number of such kind of people is less. And the third thing, that I think that Russia seriously underestimated the power of the Ukrainian soldiers. One day before the invasion, I made an interview. I gave the interview, to the Kazakhstan national TV channel. One day before invasion, and I said that the Ukrainian army is one of the toughest and most strongest army in Europe. And I did not mistake, because I know what happened. And for post-Soviet countries, not European countries, the situation with Ukraine was very unique, because they all see and all looking what happened inside our country, because they understand that they can be next. Every post-Soviet country, maybe not only post-Soviet, is failed for centuries. You know? And I think even the predecessors of Putin will not improve it, because professor said that it's very old-fashioned. They use classical, classical from 19th century things, not even 20th century. And I'm sure that Russian propaganda will be very restricted in the area. So they will not try to influence the European or Western world. They will try to, at least in next 5 or 10 years, they will try to influence the post-Soviet countries and maybe some Asia countries to explain what they did or what they would do. But it's even for... I traveled all post-Soviet countries. I'm actually a journalist specialized in post-Soviet countries. Kazakhstan, Tajikistan, Kyrgyzstan, Moldova, Georgia, all the countries. And I can tell you that the propaganda which was for 30 years, it also failed in these countries. So the society is very pro-Ukrainian, even in Kazakhstan. But the elite, the political elite, tried to balance, but it's not balance. It's a question of money. Thank you. Social media is a very, very complicated question, especially when we speak about Ukraine, Russia, and Belarus. You understand that my native language is Russian language. Second, my native language is Ukrainian language. But the people who speak Russian, millions, in post-Soviet countries, and we have common platforms where we can use. But first, I don't believe in any kind of reconciliation process. It's impossible. I know what I'm saying. It's impossible. Any kind of peace or reconciliation now is absolutely impossible. Absolutely impossible. Even the attempts to do this thing will fail. Attempts, not the process. The other thing concerning the social media, I don't know why, but in Ukraine, the most popular social media is Facebook. I don't know why. For everything. For supporting our national, our army, for collecting the money, for supporting the displaced persons, for the public activity, for everything. I have an Instagram and YouTube, but I have 40,000 subscribers in Facebook. In United States, Twitter is much more popular. In Germany, I think Instagram maybe. I'm not sure. I'm not special, but it's very difficult to use social networks. And Russia tried to use it in Ukraine within just 3 or 4 days. And I know that some, maybe several, maybe dozens of political analysts who used Facebook, they were switched out by Facebook in Ukraine. I mean, some pro-Russian Ukrainian politologists. They were switched out of Facebook by the security reasons. Because we in Ukraine knew who can be pro-Russian, who can be pro, but the people and the public figure who can promote Russian propaganda, Ukrainians, and don't speak about the Russian public figures, Ukrainians, we knew them every. And during the first days of the war, they were switched by Facebook. So the Russia cannot use their allies inside Ukraine. Because I think that Putin, when he tried to, and his analytics tried to calculate the possible victory, when they wanted to siege Kiev, they wanted to use some public figures for promoting their ideas. So they also wanted to use Facebook and social media as a propaganda. But they failed because we don't have any common platform. I mean, Russia and Ukraine in very common thing. We have different culture in many things. So that's why I think social media is important to connecting the people inside Ukraine. Social media important to connecting the people for the help of Ukraine. I mean Ukrainians, but not for some kind of bridges between Russians and Ukrainians. It's impossible because in Russia they created their own social networks, like in China. I was in China 5 times, and when I came in China in 2017, the first thing which I do, I tried to enter YouTube. But YouTube was blocked for many years in China. And they said, what kind of YouTube do you want to use? We don't have Facebook, we don't have YouTube, we don't have Instagram, we don't have Twitter, we have WeChat. This is the one social network. So now Russians, they switched out of the Instagram on YouTube and they create their own social networks, you know? The same like Chinese did 20 years ago. That's why they are allies now. Common vision, common methods, common system. And we have Instagram integration with Germans, with Europeans. This joke.
Quick question regarding the state of reconciliation. You said reconciliation is not possible in the Holocaust. Do you mean that's in the sense of not by social media or in general?
It's an eternal question. I mean, in general, now, it's impossible because the distortion, the scale of the absence of understanding and the terrible crimes, like Maria told today, about one example, I know thousands of examples. That's why I think that this process is impossible. And the attempt, this is very important thing. And I advise you to listen very thoroughly. The attempt also will not be supported. Both, I think also. Because if we speak about civil society of Russia, do you know what is the civil society of Russia? Where is it? Where is it? Maybe it exists, but exists out of Russian Federation. Because the liberal part of Russian Federation, it is 20%, they was destroyed during the last years, and it was forced to go out of Russian Federation in Europe. So you will not find the example how to influence the Russian society. And European Union and West world failed in create some kind of weapon to influence Russian Federation. I mean, the public opinion. So the biggest challenge for West now is to think how they can influence the public opinion inside Russian Federation, because we didn't have such kind of examples. You cannot say that you influence the Soviet public opinion. It was very close, very close. So the Soviet Union collapsed not because of Western propaganda, it collapsed because of the economical things and political, geopolitical things. That's why I think that the process of reconciliation now, it's impossible because it don't have any kind of base. It doesn't depend on the man. It doesn't depend on the one man who would say, okay, let's reconcile. Let's forget about what did yesterday. It depends on the objective circumstances. And there isn't any kind of ground for such kind of reconciliation. I didn't see as a scientist, as a PhD social philosophy specialist. What is the first language of Austrian people? Austrian people, from Austria. German language. German, the native language of Austrians is German. German. Deutsche. Deutschsprache. But it doesn't mean that Austria is a part of German and Deutschland. I studied very thoroughly the history of Prussia and Austria before Second World War. Before. It was very interesting history. So the history, the language, is not the indicator of the belongings to the political nation. The political nation can be very different. From the Russian-speaking persons in Ukraine, 80% of Russians, maybe 90% of Russian-speaking persons in Ukraine now, they are the most nationalist against Russia than even the Ukrainian speaking. Because Russia began to destroy first in 2014 and in 2022 the Russian-speaking territory. I mean the Russian-speaking part of Ukraine. Native language of Maria is Russian also, because she's from Dnipro, but we are with Maria the most anti-Putin political maybe activists than even some of the Ukrainian speaking activists. So that's what Russia did. So they failed, the Putin system failed in any kind of promotion of Russian propaganda, because they even cannot use language. Because if I Russian speaking, it doesn't mean that I belong to Putin's or Russian Federation system. Do you know why? Because I didn't remember Soviet Union. I mean, when I went to school, first class, it was already independent Ukraine country. I didn't remember Soviet, and Maria also did not remember. So we are generation of new political nation.
So it's a question.
Yeah.
What I think is when I see eastern part of Ukraine, which is now occupied by Russia, you do have people there who want to stick with Russia. You have people fighting for Russia against Ukraine.
I cannot.
What kind of people are those?
It's very interesting question, but I cannot answer instead of them. They have to answer.
What is your guess? I mean,
Eh,
they are Ukrainians just like you are. They want to be part of Russia. I mean, how do they come?
It's a very interesting question. You should go and ask them.
It's a question.
Maybe you're right. Maybe we Ukrainians have an immunity. I mean, maybe they don't have such kind of immunity from Russia propaganda. No, do you know vaccine against Russia propaganda? Not only against COVID, but against Russian. That's why we had it. They did not have it, and maybe, but I cannot explain.
Maybe it's because you have Germany, you have Western Germany, you have former Eastern Germany, and you have, as Maria just said,
What is your name? Huh?
my name.
Yeah, Sven. Yeah, German or Austrian? Wait. I have very interesting question. That in German and Austrian society, even during the World War, I don't want to take the example of Second World War, but always in Austrian society, Austria were the people who would ally with Germans. Always, during Otto Bismarck, during the Habsburg monarchy, during the Hitler, and always were part of the Austrian society who wanted to ally with Germans. But not only, and the Austrians want to be independent. The same in Germans. Some Germans want to conquer Austria. Some said, "Guys, leave alone. Don't please." We have common culture, Goethe, we have everything common, but leave alone, please. That's why you have the answer on your question. This is a part of societies, which historically were created. And how you can explain why some of the Austrians want to be with Germans and some want to be independent? Do you know Bronze, the former Prime Minister of Austria? Yeah, he was very famous. He always wanted to be with Germans, but then he changed that opinion and became independent. And your second part of the question, because I remember that there were two questions. One was difficult, not for me, and second, I can take.
Asking about the Ukrainian perspective on how Ukraine would reconcile with the Western world after.
It's already done. I'm not kidding. This is actually one of the most important thing which we, including you, what country are you from? India. Maybe later. Ukraine first, okay? India in European Union after Ukraine, because you have some problems with China, you know. And I'm kidding, but 8 million people officially from Ukraine moved here, and they get in European Union so-called legal protection. Yeah? And more than 1 million in Germany. 1 million in Germany, 1.3 in Poland, 500,000 in Czech Republic. I know all the statistics. So it's already integrated. And I think that the next challenge, the biggest challenge is to give the answer, what next? But not we have to give this answer, not Ukrainians. European Union have to give answer. Because everything, a lot of depends on European Union. I don't want to speak about NATO, this big politics, but European Union is an example, and NATO can follow, because NATO is security, European Union it's social, economy, and other things. That's why I think that we have already integrated with European Union, and Ukraine also integrated with NATO, with like a maybe main ally, main partner of ally. But this year will be crucial, because in 3 months, in 3 months there will be Vilnius summit in NATO, the Vilnius in Lithuania, and NATO have to give answer to Ukraine. What kind of answer we don't know. The same with European Union community. So we are already here, we are already integrated, we know languages, we know the... Yes, there are a lot of bureaucratic things concerning the integration of Ukraine into European Union. It's a very complicated question, not very fast, but I think the future of Ukraine lies in European perspective. I don't know what will be the future of European Union.
That's bigger.
Yeah. It's a very good question, Very good question. Ah, you're from US. Oh, I have a lot of questions. A lot of questions. So, answering your question, what state are you from? Kansas. Oh, very classic American state. Very conservative. You're very common with this land, with this state. American conservatives is your problem. Yes, I think and I feel that Russia may try to focus on post-Soviet countries, mostly Russian-speaking post-Soviet countries, because they cannot influence, for example, Tajikistan, where the most people speak Persian, no, Tajik, but it's Farsi language, and it's very difficult to penetrate inside the Tajikistan, but they try to influence with the help of Russian-speaking Tajik people. I think they use what I see, because I communicate with all post-Soviet countries and journalists and politicians. They use the same tactics which they used during 70 years. Professor, despite that he's not from post-Soviet countries, but he explained very, very accurately that they use very classical passages or schablons or examples. Because the post-Soviet people, that's actually what Sven told about the East Germany, they remember on some kind of neurobiological, genetic, they remember some historical narratives which were very close to their mentality, The common victory against the Germans, maybe language, the culture, the literature. And Russia tried to take this mixture, it's not pure, it's just a mixture, and they reform it and then to throw to the media, which is the other people in post-Soviet countries understand. It's very difficult to do such kind of things with you, with Americans, because you have your own propaganda. And that's why I think Russia will also fail in post-Soviet countries, because the people, society, has already new generation of the people. Like I, in Ukraine, the same one are in Kazakhstan, in Moldova, in Georgia, and other countries. That's why Russians cannot persuade them to be pro-Russian. It's impossible. It's absolutely impossible. That's why after the failed of such kind of information propaganda in post-Soviet countries, they will try to influence only on their own nation. I mean, inside Russia, not out of Russia. It's very logical procedure, but it takes time. A lot of things which were made in European Union and world history made by political motivation, because of the political reasons. And you know that I communicated with a lot of political analysts. 3 months ago I was in Davos in Switzerland. 2 months ago I was 1 month ago I was in Munich conference. I know a lot of famous politologists, historians, professors, and I always ask one question when I take the interview from them. So we all were speaking about the war. That the war would begin on the 24th of February, and a lot of Americans also we are speaking about the war will start. And everybody, we are sure that the war is inevitable. But nobody, you will not find any kind of good analysis which could foresee the consequences of humanitarian crisis. So everybody was anticipating of the war, but nobody anticipated that 5 million or 8 million of people came out of Ukraine here. Because if some country foresee this, they have prepared something. But European Union found a special directive for refugees. It's called Legal Protection Act, which was created 22 years ago for the refugees from former Yugoslavia, but never was used, and the European Union adopted this directive to help Ukrainians. It was a political step, and nobody asked whether these people who came in the European Union, people, the refugees, which were forced to come because of the war, whether they correspondence to some criteria or did not correspondence. It was political step. That's why when we speak about the future integration of Ukraine and European Union, we have already proved that we are Europeans. And the answer depends on the European Union, but not on the Ukrainians. If we speak about the criteria. Some things we failed, I mean, we had some mistakes concerning the democratization, but they are not critical. They can be repaired during the Annäherung, how we call it in English. Annäherung. Yeah, coming closer, because the German word is much more precise than the English word. Yeah, but Annäherung, I like it more, you know, in political sense. And that's why I think that some mistakes which we all did, but not by me, but our politicians, they can be repaired by the new political generation of Ukrainians. But a lot of depends on the European Union. The most, the meat, this is the Annäherung of China and Russia. Russians don't know China very good, you know. China is a very, very, very dangerous ally. They can, this is a very, when Russian propaganda, because yeah, very short. I read Russia propaganda about Chinese Russian airlines, and I read Chinese propaganda about Russian. And Russian shows that it's a very good step for the future, and Chinese said that it's an ordinary thing. We just want to cooperate with some small country, you know, but different propaganda. Thank you.